They came to demolish the abandoned shack, but when an elderly woman with a cane came out the door, the noise of hammers echoed through the morning when Martha felt the floor tremble beneath her bare feet. At 72, she didn't expect to wake up to men shouting outside her small wooden shack in the Wicker Park neighborhood of Chicago. The baby in her arms began to cry, frightened by the deafening noise that was getting closer and closer to the front door. "Hush, my angel," whispered Martha, gently rocking the boy of just 3 months, whom she affectionately called Leo. Her trembling hands held tight to the carved wooden cane that had belonged to her late husband, Arthur Sullivan. The metallic sound against the old wood of the house made her heart race. She knew this day would come sooner or later. The neighbors' conversations over the last few weeks left no doubt. A company was buying all the land in the area to build a modern residential complex. But Martha never imagined they would show up without warning, ready to tear down her house as if it were disposable trash. "Mrs. Martha," shouted a male voice from outside, "you need to come out now. We're starting the demolition." Her stomach turned. Demolition. The word echoed in her mind like a nightmare. That simple 3-room shack had been her home for over 40 years. It was there that she raised her own children, who now lived far away and rarely got in touch. It was there that she cared for Arthur until his final days, and it was there she intended to stay until God called her. "I'm not leaving," she murmured to herself, adjusting Leo better in her lap. The baby had stopped crying and was now looking at her with those dark, curious eyes that melted her inside. "We're not leaving here, my boy. This is our home." The noise grew closer. Martha could hear the men's voices talking, arguing about schedule and delivery deadlines. Through the cracks in the window, she glimpsed blue uniforms and yellow helmets. There were at least 5 or 6 workers, all young and strong, carrying heavy tools. "Mr. Miller said the house had been empty for years," commented one of them, his voice carrying a Midwestern rural accent. "Yeah, but look at the mess they made with the paperwork," replied another, who seemed to be the foreman. "Now we have to deal with this situation. The owner of the company is going to be furious if we delay the schedule because of this." Martha felt a mix of anger and sadness rising in her chest. Empty for years. How could they say such a thing? She had woken up there every morning for over 4 decades. She knew every creak of the wood, every damp stain on the wall, every corner where the sun hit first at dawn. Leo began to squirm restlessly in her arms. The boy was hungry, and she needed to prepare the bottle. But how could she do that with all that commotion outside? Her high blood pressure medication was in the kitchen, and she felt the anxiety making her heart race dangerously. "There's someone in there," shouted a different, younger voice. "I saw a shadow moving in the window." The silence that followed was even more frightening than the previous noise. Martha imagined the men looking at each other, confused and perhaps a little worried. She knew she needed to make a decision. She could try to hide and wait for them to leave, but that would only delay the problem. Or she could face them head-on and fight for what was rightfully hers. The cane creaked against the wooden floor as she rose from the rocking chair where she spent most of her days. Her legs hurt more than usual that morning, and she suspected the humidity was affecting her arthritis. But the physical pain was nothing compared to the ache in her chest at the thought of losing her home. "Dear God, give me strength," she whispered a quick prayer, kissing the baby's forehead before slowly heading to the door. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot who are just starting out. Now continuing. The door latch was rusty and hard to open. Martha had to push with her shoulder, balancing Leo with one arm while pulling the old doorknob. When she finally managed to open it, the strong morning light blinded her for a moment. She blinked several times until she could focus on the group of men standing just a few meters from her door. The silence that fell was absolute. The hammers that seconds before had made a deafening noise now hung inert in the workers' hands. They all looked at her with a mixture of surprise and embarrassment, as if they had just seen a ghost. "Ma'am," said the man, who seemed to be the supervisor, taking off his yellow hard hat and revealing sweaty, graying hair. "Do you live here?" The question sounded almost ridiculous to Martha. There she was coming out of the house in a robe and slippers, holding a baby, and the man was asking if she lived there. But she understood the confusion. To them, that house should have been empty for years, abandoned and ready to be demolished. "Yes, I do," she replied with a firm voice, despite her nervousness. "I've lived here for 43 years. This is my home." The supervisor looked at the other men, clearly disconcerted. He took a clipboard from one of the assistants and began to flip through some papers quickly, as if searching for a magical answer that would explain the situation. "But in the documents we received," he said, unable to hide the confusion in his voice, "it says this property has been vacant since 2018. There's no record of any residents here." "Well then, the documents are wrong," Martha retorted, adjusting Leo better in her lap. The baby looked curiously at the strange men, not understanding the tension in the air. "I never left. This house is mine by right." One of the younger workers, who couldn't have been more than 20, whispered something into the ear of the colleague beside him. Martha noticed the look of pity they directed at her and felt a stab of irritation. She didn't need anyone's pity. She just needed them to respect her rights. "Do you have documents that prove this, ma'am?" asked the supervisor, trying to sound both kind and official at the same time. The question hit Martha like a punch in the stomach. Documents. It always came back to the damn documents. She knew she had papers stored somewhere in the house, but after the fire in the kitchen 3 years ago, a lot had been lost. Arthur had always handled that bureaucratic part, and after he passed, she never managed to get properly organized with these matters. "Yes, I do," she lied, raising her chin with dignity. "I just need some time to find them." The supervisor sighed and looked at his wristwatch. It was evident he hadn't expected this situation and didn't quite know how to proceed. The company he worked for, Horizon Development Group, probably had a tight schedule, and any delay could result in serious problems for him. "Look, Mrs. he began, hesitating because he didn't know her name. "Martha. Martha Beatrice Sullivan." "Mrs. Martha, I'm going to have to call my boss and explain the situation. You understand that I can't simply cancel an authorized demolition without being sure that—" "Without being sure of what?" she interrupted, feeling the anger grow in her chest. "That I exist. That this is my house. Look around. Do you see those plants in the window? I planted every single one of them. Do you see that wooden fence over there? My husband built it with his own 2 hands. This here is our life, not just some house to be torn down." Leo began to cry, perhaps sensing the tension in her voice. Martha swayed gently, humming a lullaby her own mother used to sing to her as a child. The soft melody contrasted with the tense situation she was living through. "Easy now, my love," she murmured to the baby. "Grandma Martha won't let anything bad happen to you." The workers watched the scene in silence. Some seemed genuinely moved by the sight of the elderly woman with the baby, while others just wanted to resolve the issue quickly and get on with the job. The youngest of the group stepped forward. "Ma'am, if you really do live here, maybe we should wait for some legal guidance before proceeding," he suggested, earning a stern look from the foreman. "Tyler, you don't need to chime in on things you don't understand," the foreman reprimanded. "I'm the one who calls the shots here." But Martha noticed the man was clearly in doubt. He took his cell phone from his pocket and stepped a few paces away to make the call. She could catch fragments of the conversation, words like problem, elderly lady, and documents. His tone of voice suggested whoever was on the other end of the line was not at all pleased with the situation. While waiting for the outcome of the call, Martha took a better look at the men before her. They were honest workers. She could see it in their tired faces and calloused hands. They probably had families to support and were just following orders. They weren't the real enemies in this story. "Mrs. Martha," said Tyler, the young man, approaching carefully. "May I ask whose baby that is?" The question she most feared had arrived. Martha looked at Leo, now sleeping peacefully in her arms, and felt her chest tighten. How could she explain to strangers a story she herself was still trying to process? "He's my grandson," she replied, avoiding the young man's direct gaze. "Oh, it's good you have company," Tyler smiled genuinely. "Must be a joy to take care of him." If only he knew the full truth, Martha thought. The joy was real, but the situation was far more complicated than it appeared. Leo had come into her life in a way she never expected, and now he was all she had in the world. The foreman returned from the call with a serious expression on his face. Martha braced for the worst, gripping her cane tighter and hugging the baby to her chest. "Mrs. Martha," he said, his tone more respectful now, "my boss has determined we will suspend the demolition temporarily until the situation is clarified. You'll have to contact the company responsible for the project and sort out this document issue." An immense relief washed over her, but Martha knew it was only a temporary victory. The real fight was just beginning. She nodded, trying to appear more confident than she felt. "Thank you very much," she said simply. "But it's important you understand," the foreman continued, "that if you can't prove legal ownership of the property, we will have to proceed with the demolition. The company can't take a loss because of bureaucratic mix-ups." Martha understood the message perfectly. She had little time to prove that house was really hers, or she would lose everything. As she watched the men pack up their tools and slowly walk away, she felt the weight of responsibility settling on her shoulders. It wasn't just about her anymore. Now she had Leo to protect too. "Let's go inside, my boy," she whispered to the baby. "Grandma needs to think about what to do now." When she closed the door behind her, Martha leaned against the old wood and sighed deeply. The house was quiet again, but she knew that peace was temporary. She needed to act fast if she wanted to keep the only home she had ever known. She walked slowly to the kitchen, where she prepared a bottle for Leo. While the water heated, her eyes scanned the simple but cozy space. The old pots hanging on the wall, the wooden table where she drank coffee every morning, the small window from which she watched the neighbors passing by on the street. How could anyone say that house was abandoned? Every object there told a story, held a memory. The chipped cup Arthur used for his black coffee, the plant pot on the window where she grew herbs, the faded photograph of her children hanging on the wall. Leo woke up to the sound of the boiling water and began to cry again. Martha finished preparing the bottle quickly and settled into the rocking chair in the living room to feed him. It was amazing how that little being had brought renewed purpose to her life in recent months. She remembered the cold winter morning when she found the baby at her door. He was wrapped in an old blanket, crying from cold and hunger. There was no note, no explanation, just an abandoned baby someone had left there, trusting she would do the right thing, and she did. Without hesitation, she brought Leo inside, warmed some milk, and cared for him as if he were her own grandchild. She tried to look for the parents in the first few weeks, discreetly asked the neighbors, but no one knew anything. Over time, she stopped actively searching and began to accept that this baby had come into her life for some greater reason. "You brought light to this old house," she said softly to Leo, who nursed peacefully while looking at her, "and Grandma isn't going to let anyone separate us." But even as she spoke these words with conviction, Martha felt a tightness in her chest. She knew raising a child at her age wouldn't be easy. Her medications already cost a fortune, and now she had to buy diapers, milk, and everything a baby needed, not to mention the legal issue that had just come up. After Leo finished the bottle and went back to sleep, Martha decided to look for the documents she had mentioned to the supervisor. She knew she was in a complicated situation, but she needed to at least try to find something that proved her rights to the house. She started with the old dresser in the bedroom, where Arthur had always kept important papers. The drawer creaked as she opened it, revealing a mess of old bills, expired prescriptions, and yellowed photographs. Her trembling hands sifted through each paper, looking for anything resembling a deed or proof of ownership. At the bottom of the drawer, she found a faded folder she hadn't seen in years. Inside were some documents that had survived the kitchen fire 3 years ago. Most were stained or partially burned, but she managed to identify some old receipts for municipal tax payments. "At least it's something," she murmured to herself, setting aside the papers that seemed most important. It wasn't much, but the receipts showed that someone had been paying taxes on that property for decades. Maybe it would be enough to prove the house had never been abandoned. Martha carefully folded the documents and placed them in a small bag she carried to protect them. The rest of the morning passed slowly. She did her usual household chores, trying to maintain a normal routine while her mind buzzed with worries. She needed to seek legal help, but she didn't have the money to pay for a private lawyer. Maybe she could get free assistance from some public agency. Around noon, there was another knock at the door. Martha felt her heart race, fearing it was the workers returning with orders to proceed with the demolition. But when she opened the door, she found two neighbors who lived on the street above. "Mrs. Martha," said Gladys, a white-haired lady she had known by sight for years. "We heard about what happened this morning. How outrageous that they would try to demolish your house like that." "It sure is," agreed the other neighbor, Mildred, shaking her head indignantly. "We came to offer help with whatever you need. This can't be left like this." Martha felt her eyes fill with tears. It had been a long time since she had received such expressions of solidarity. After Arthur had left and the children moved to other cities, she had grown used to facing problems alone. "Thank you very much," she managed to say, her voice choked with emotion. "I'm not really sure what to do now." "The first thing is to go to the legal aid office," Gladys suggested authoritatively. "They provide free assistance for people in your situation. You can't face this alone." "And we'll talk to other neighbors too," added Mildred. "A lot of people have known you for years. You might need witnesses to prove you've always lived here." For the first time since that morning, Martha felt less hopeless. Having the support of the neighbors, even if they were only acquaintances from greetings, meant a lot to her. Perhaps she wasn't as alone as she had imagined. "There's another thing," said Gladys, hesitating a little before continuing. "We noticed you're taking care of a baby. If it's not too indiscreet, is he family?" The question Martha most feared had arrived again, this time from people who lived nearby and could have observed the situation more closely. She knew she couldn't lie indefinitely, but she also wasn't ready to tell the whole truth. "It's a complicated situation," she replied evasively, "but I'm taking care of him with a lot of affection." Gladys and Mildred exchanged glances, clearly sensing there was more to the story than Martha was willing to reveal, but they respected her privacy and didn't press the matter. "The important thing is that you're not alone," said Mildred, lightly touching Martha's arm. "Whatever you need, you can count on us." After the neighbors left, Martha felt a little more hopeful. At least she had some allies in the fight that lay ahead. She decided to follow their advice and go to the legal aid office the following Monday. The weekend passed slowly, with Martha taking care of Leo and trying not to think too much about the uncertain future awaiting them. She established a routine with the baby that helped keep her mind occupied, waking up early to prepare the first bottle, changing diapers, giving baths, and repeating the cycle throughout the day. On Monday morning, Martha dressed in her best clothes and placed Leo in the makeshift seat she had made with pillows in a sturdy cardboard box. The walk to the city center would be long, but she had no money for public transport. The legal aid office was in an old building in downtown Chicago, with huge lines of people waiting for service. Martha arrived early, but still had to wait more than 3 hours to be seen. Leo was an angel during the entire wait, sleeping most of the time, or looking curiously at the people around him. When it was finally her turn, Martha was received by a young lawyer named Ms. Harrison, who couldn't have been more than 30. Despite her age, the young woman demonstrated knowledge and genuine interest in helping. "Mrs. Martha, I'll be honest with you," said Ms. Harrison, after analyzing the documents she had brought. "The situation isn't easy. These tax payment receipts help, but they aren't enough to definitively prove ownership of the property." Martha's heart sank. She had been expecting that answer, but hearing it from a professional made everything more real and frightening. "But we still have some options," the lawyer continued. "We can argue adverse possession, since you've lived there for decades without dispute. We can also question the legality of the documents presented by the construction company." "And what are the chances of success?" asked Martha, trying to keep her voice steady. Ms. Harrison hesitated before answering, clearly choosing her words carefully. "It's hard to say without knowing all the details of the other party's case, but I will fight with everything I have to defend your rights. No one can be evicted from their home without due process of law." Martha left the legal aid office with mixed feelings. On one hand, she finally had professional legal assistance. On the other, it was clear the battle would be difficult and the outcome uncertain. Ms. Harrison had asked for a few days to better analyze the case and prepare a defense strategy. On the way back home, Martha stopped at a pharmacy to buy diapers for Leo. Money was tight, and she began to worry seriously about finances. Her pension was small and barely covered her basic needs. Now, with the baby's expenses, the situation was becoming unsustainable. "We'll have to find a solution," she murmured to Leo as she walked slowly through the downtown streets. "Grandma can't give up now." When she got home, she found a surprise waiting at the door. There was a bag with groceries and baby products, along with a handwritten note. "For Mrs. Martha and little Leo, with care, your neighbors." Martha couldn't hold back her tears. The kindness of those people who barely knew her touched her deeply. For the first time in many years, she felt part of a community that cared about her well-being. Inside the bag was a little bit of everything: powdered milk, diapers, jars of baby food, and even some fresh vegetables for her. At the bottom, she found an envelope with money and another note: "For the lawyer's expenses. Don't give up your fight." The neighbor's generosity was moving, but it also made her reflect on her own situation. She couldn't depend on others' charity indefinitely. She needed to find a way to support herself and care for Leo with dignity. That night, while rocking the baby to sleep, Martha made an important decision. She would tell the full truth to the lawyer, Ms. Harrison, at their next meeting. About how she found Leo, about her initial attempts to locate his parents, and about how she had decided to care for him as if he were family. She knew this revelation could complicate her legal situation even further, but she couldn't keep lying. If she was going to fight for her home and for the right to care for Leo, she had to do it with honesty and transparency. The following Tuesday, Ms. Harrison called to schedule a new meeting. She said she had discovered some irregularities in the construction company's documents and wanted to discuss it in person. Martha felt a flicker of hope, but reminded herself not to get her hopes up too much. The meeting took place at Martha's own home as Ms. Harrison wanted to see the place and the conditions she lived in. The lawyer was impressed with the well-kept state of the small house and the impeccable organization of everything. "Mrs. Martha, it's impossible for anyone to say this house was abandoned," commented Ms. Harrison, observing the well-tended plants in the window and the overall cleanliness of the place. "It's clear someone has lived here for a long time." It was at that moment that Martha decided to tell the truth about Leo. With a voice trembling with nervousness, she recounted the whole story from the morning she found the baby on her doorstep to her decision to care for him as if he were family. Ms. Harrison listened quietly, taking notes and occasionally asking questions to clarify details. When Martha finished, the lawyer sighed and remained thoughtful for several minutes. "Mrs. Martha, do you understand that caring for a child without legal authorization can bring complications?" she finally said. "I understand," Martha replied, hugging Leo more tightly. "But what should I have done? Left him to freeze to death on the street?" "Of course not," Ms. Harrison hastened to clarify. "You did what any person with a heart would do, but now we need to regularize his legal situation as well." The lawyer explained that it would be necessary to report the case to Child Protective Services and begin a process for temporary custody. She also suggested trying to locate Leo's biological family, if it was still possible. "And if we find the parents?" asked Martha, fear evident in her voice. "It depends on the circumstances," Ms. Harrison answered honestly. "If they voluntarily abandoned the child and are not in a position to care for him, you may be entitled to permanent custody." It was a complex situation that would require time and patience to resolve, but at least now Martha had a competent professional by her side, fighting both for her home and for the right to care for Leo. Dear listener, if you are enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we are just starting out. Now continuing. In the following weeks, Ms. Harrison worked tirelessly on Martha's two cases. On one hand, she legally contested the demolition attempt, arguing that the Horizon Development Group's documents contained irregularities and that the due legal process for eviction had not been respected. On the other hand, she began the procedures to regularize Leo's situation with the competent authorities. The first step was a visit from Child Protective Services. Martha became extremely nervous when she learned that social workers would come to inspect her home and evaluate her conditions for caring for a child. She spent days cleaning every corner of the house and mentally preparing for the questions they would likely ask. The social worker who came was named Mrs. Jenkins, a middle-aged woman with a stern appearance but a gentle voice. She thoroughly examined the house, checked the hygiene conditions, the baby's nutrition, and asked several questions about the care routine. "Mrs. Martha," said Mrs. Jenkins after completing her evaluation, "I can see that you are taking very good care of the child. The house is clean, the baby is healthy and well fed, but I need to be honest. Your age and health conditions are concerning factors." Martha felt her blood run cold. She knew this issue would eventually be raised, but she wasn't prepared to hear it so directly. "I know I am 72 years old," she replied, trying to remain calm, "but I still have a lot of love to give and energy to care for him. Leo has brought new life to my existence." "I don't doubt that," Mrs. Jenkins said kindly, "but caring for a baby is extremely physically demanding. And if you have a health emergency, who would care for the child?" It was a valid question that Martha did not know how to answer. Her children lived far away and rarely made contact. She had no close relatives in Chicago. The reality of the situation began to weigh on her overwhelmingly. "For now I will authorize that the child remains with you temporarily," continued Mrs. Jenkins, "but regular follow-up and some provisions will be necessary to ensure the well-being of both of you." Among the provisions, Mrs. Jenkins mentioned regular medical checkups for both Martha and Leo, improvements to home safety, and the need to establish a support network for emergency situations. Martha agreed with everything, relieved to be able to keep Leo for now, but aware that she was being closely watched and that any misstep could result in the loss of the child she had learned to love as a grandson. Meanwhile, the legal process related to the house was advancing. Ms. Harrison had discovered that the construction company had bought the land from a supposed owner who did not have proper documentation of possession. It was a significant legal loophole that could invalidate the entire transaction. "Mrs. Martha," explained Ms. Harrison during one of her visits, "we discovered that the man who sold the land to the construction company obtained the documentation irregularly a few years ago. This means the sale could be considered invalid." The news brought renewed hope to Martha. Perhaps there was a real chance of keeping her house after all, but Ms. Harrison also warned that the process would be long and that the construction company would certainly contest the decision. "In the meantime," the lawyer continued, "we've obtained an injunction preventing any demolition until the situation is definitively resolved. You can rest easy for now." It was a temporary relief, but Martha knew the battle was just beginning. The construction company would not easily give up on a project that likely involved a lot of money. Her suspicions were confirmed when, the following week, she received a visit from a man in a suit who introduced himself as the legal representative of the construction company. He came with a proposal that made Martha's heart race with nervousness. "Mrs. Martha," said the man, trying to sound friendly, "my client is willing to offer a generous financial compensation in exchange for the voluntary vacation of the property. It would be enough for you to buy a better house elsewhere and still have money left to take care of yourself." The offer was tempting, especially considering her financial difficulties. But Martha couldn't imagine living anywhere other than that house that had been her home for so many years. "I'm not interested," she replied firmly. "This house is not for sale." "You need to be practical," insisted the man. "With all due respect, you're at an age where you should be thinking about more comfort, fewer worries. In a new house with all the modern infrastructure—" "I already said I'm not interested," Martha interrupted him, feeling her irritation grow. "And I'd like you to leave my house now." The man sighed and left a card on the table before leaving. "In case you change your mind," he said, "the offer remains valid for now, but not indefinitely." After he left, Martha sat in the rocking chair with Leo on her lap and tried to calm her shaken nerves. The pressure was increasing from all sides. The construction company, child protective services, the financial worries. Sometimes she wondered if it wouldn't be easier to simply accept the offer and start a new life elsewhere. But then she looked at Leo, at the photographs of Arthur on the wall, at every corner of that house that held decades of memories, and knew she couldn't give up. That was her place in the world, and she would fight for it until the end. One afternoon, while bathing Leo, Martha noticed he was heavier and more responsive than when he arrived. In the months under her care, the baby had developed remarkably. He smiled when she talked to him, followed objects with his gaze, and began to make some sounds that seemed like attempts at communication. "You're growing so fast, my angel," she murmured as she dried him carefully. "Soon, you'll be crawling all over the house." The prospect of seeing Leo grow and develop in that house filled her with joy, but it also reminded her of the importance of winning the legal battle. She wasn't fighting just for herself, but for the future of that child who had become the center of her life. Mrs. Jenkins, the social worker, had established bi-weekly visits to monitor the development of the situation. During one of these visits, she brought news that made Martha freeze with worry. "Mrs. Martha, our investigation has located a young woman who may be the child's biological mother," said Mrs. Jenkins carefully. She came forward on her own after hearing the story through community talk. The world seemed to stop for Martha. All those months, part of her had hoped this moment would come, but another part had settled into the idea that Leo would always be hers. Does she want to take him away?" she managed to ask, her voice almost a whisper. "It's complicated," Mrs. Jenkins replied. "She's very young, only 17, and is in a situation of social vulnerability. For now, she just wants to confirm if the child is really her son and to see the conditions he's being cared for in." Martha felt a mix of relief and anxiety. At least the mother hadn't appeared demanding the child immediately, but the situation was about to get much more complicated. "When is she coming?" she asked, trying to mentally prepare for the meeting. "Tomorrow afternoon, if you agree," Mrs. Jenkins answered. "We think it's important for you to meet and talk about the situation." Martha spent a sleepless night, imagining what the meeting would be like. How would the young woman react upon seeing Leo? Would she regret having abandoned the baby? Would she want to take him back? The following afternoon, Mrs. Jenkins arrived accompanied by a thin, timid girl who didn't look older than 15, despite the 17 years mentioned. Her brown hair was tied in a simple ponytail, and her clothes were clearly worn and mended. "Mrs. Martha," said Mrs. Jenkins, "this is Amber, the young woman I spoke about yesterday." Amber stood at the door, looking nervously into the house. When her eyes met Leo in Martha's arms, she couldn't contain an emotional sob. "It's him," she whispered, bringing a hand to her mouth. "It's my son." Martha felt her chest tighten, seeing the girl's genuine emotion. It was evident that Amber had been through a lot of suffering, and that the decision to abandon the baby hadn't been easy. "Come in, dear," said Martha gently, motioning for Amber to come closer. "Come see how well he's cared for." Amber entered hesitantly, as if stepping onto sacred ground. When she got close to Martha and Leo, her tears began to flow freely. "He looks so different," she said, extending a trembling hand to touch the baby's face. "He was so skinny when I—" "You don't need to explain now," Martha interrupted softly. "What matters is that he's well and healthy." Leo looked curiously at the unfamiliar young woman, showing no signs of recognition. To him, Martha was the only mother he knew. The reality of this situation hit Amber like a punch, and she began to cry more intensely. "I didn't want to do that," she sobbed, "but I couldn't take care of him. I had nowhere to live, no money, no one to help me." "Mrs. Jenkins approached and placed a comforting hand on the girl's shoulder. "Amber, no one is judging you," she said in a gentle voice. "We know you were in a very difficult situation and did what you thought was best for your son." Martha watched the scene with a broken heart. She could see that Amber loved Leo, but it was also evident that the young woman had been through significant trauma. It wasn't a simple matter of right or wrong, but a complex situation that required compassion from all sides. "Amber," said Martha delicately, "would you like to hold him for a moment?" The question made the young woman's eyes light up with hope, but also revealed a deep fear. "May I?" she asked timidly. Martha slowly stood up and, with infinite care, transferred Leo into the arms of his biological mother. The baby got a little fussy with the change, but calmed down when Amber began speaking to him in a low, affectionate tone. "Hi, my love," whispered the girl, gently rocking her son. "Mommy missed you so much." The scene was simultaneously beautiful and painful to watch. Martha felt a pang of jealousy, but at the same time could not deny the natural connection between mother and child. Mrs. Jenkins observed everything in silence, making mental notes for her report. After a few minutes, Amber carefully handed Leo back to Martha. "Thank you," she said, wiping tears from her face. "Thank you for taking such good care of him." "There's nothing to thank me for," Martha replied. "He was a gift in my life." Mrs. Jenkins suggested they sit down to talk about the situation. Amber told her story with a choked voice, revealing she had gotten pregnant at 16 and was thrown out of her home by her parents when they found out. She had spent the last months of her pregnancy living on the street or in temporary shelters. "When he was born, I tried to care for him for a few weeks," she explained, "but I was starving, sleeping rough. One night it was very cold and I saw he was getting sick. That's when I decided—" She couldn't finish the sentence, but everyone understood. Amber had left Leo on Martha's doorstep in a desperate act of maternal love, hoping someone could give her son what she couldn't. "I kept watching from afar," Amber continued. "I saw when you brought him inside. I'd see you caring for him through the window sometimes. I knew he was in good hands, but I couldn't completely stay away." The revelation that Amber had been watching for the past months added a new dimension to the situation. It hadn't been a definitive abandonment, but a desperate mother trying to ensure her child's well-being the only way she knew how. "And now?" asked Martha, fearing the answer. "What do you intend to do?" Amber was silent for a long moment, clearly wrestling with conflicting emotions. "I want my son back," she said finally, but her voice didn't sound convincing. "But I also know I'm not in a position to care for him properly yet." Mrs. Jenkins intervened in the conversation. "There are a few options we can consider," she explained. "Amber could work to improve her living situation with support from social services, while Leo remains with Mrs. Martha temporarily. Or we could explore a shared custody arrangement where both would have responsibilities." The idea of shared custody interested them both. Martha could continue being the primary caregiver, given her experience and stability, while Amber would work to rebuild her life and maintain regular contact with her son. "It would be as if he had two mothers," suggested Mrs. Jenkins, "one who cares for him day to day, and another who is present and participating in his upbringing." Amber seemed relieved by the possibility. It was evident she wanted to be part of her son's life, but also recognized her current limitations. "I accept," said Amber, looking at Martha. "If you agree, of course." Martha looked at Leo in her arms, and then at the young woman before her. She saw something of herself in Amber's determination, a strength forged through suffering. "I accept," she replied, "but on one condition. You have to let me help you too. A mother who is suffering can't care well for her child." Amber nodded vigorously, and for the first time since she arrived, smiled genuinely. In the following days, Mrs. Jenkins began working to formalize the shared custody arrangement. It wouldn't be a simple process, but there were legal precedents, and more importantly, all parties involved were willing to cooperate for Leo's well-being. Amber began to visit regularly, first for a few hours and gradually increasing the time. Martha used these opportunities to teach the young mother childcare techniques, from preparing bottles to changing diapers and interpreting the baby's different types of cries. "When he cries like that sharper, it's hunger," Martha explained patiently. "But if it's a hoarser cry, it's usually sleepiness or colic." Amber absorbed every piece of information like a sponge, clearly determined to become the best possible mother for her son. Seeing the girl's dedication moved Martha deeply and strengthened her conviction that they had made the right decision. During one of the visits, Amber brought news that changed everything. "Mrs. Martha," she said with barely contained excitement, "I got a job at a store downtown. It's only part-time for now, but it's a start. And Mrs. Jenkins helped me get a spot at a boarding house that accepts single mothers." It was significant progress. For the first time since they had met, Martha saw real hope in the young woman's eyes. Amber was fighting to rebuild her life, and it filled her with maternal pride. "I'm very proud of you," Martha said sincerely. Leo is going to be so proud of the brave mother he has." While Leo's situation was stabilizing positively, the legal process related to the house continued to advance. Ms. Harrison had secured several small victories that strengthened Martha's case, but the development company wasn't giving up easily. The turning point came when an elderly neighbor named Mr. Henry appeared with documents no one expected. He had been a friend of Arthur Sullivan decades ago and had kept some papers he considered important. "Martha," he said one sunny afternoon, "I found some of Arthur's things among my documents. I thought you might be interested." Among the papers Mr. Henry brought was a copy of the house's original deed, dated 1982, when Arthur had bought the land and built the small cabin. The document was yellowed and stained, but legible and apparently valid. Martha could hardly believe her eyes. During all those months searching for proof of her ownership, the most important evidence had been kept by a neighbor who didn't even know the importance of the papers. "Why did you never mention this before?" she asked, still in shock. "I didn't even know you were in trouble," Mr. Henry replied, scratching his head. "I only heard about the demolition story last week. Then I remembered I had some of Arthur's things stored away." Miss Harrison was euphoric when she saw the documents. With the original deed, Martha's case became practically unbeatable. The development company had bought land that had had a legal owner for over 40 years. "Mrs. Martha," the lawyer said with a radiant smile, "now we can sue the developer for attempted illegal property seizure. You will not only keep your house, but may be entitled to compensation for the distress caused." The news spread through the neighborhood like wildfire. Gladys and Mildred were the first to congratulate Martha, followed by a succession of neighbors who had followed her struggle with interest and support. "I knew you would make it," said Gladys, hugging Martha affectionately. "Justice always wins in the end." Amber was present when the news arrived and was equally emotional. The stability of the house meant security for Leo and for the future they were building together. "Now he'll be able to grow up in the right place," said Amber, looking at her son playing in Martha's lap, "with two mothers who love him." The construction company tried to contest the authenticity of the documents presented by Martha, but an official investigation confirmed that the deed was legitimate and that all property taxes had been paid regularly over the years. Faced with irrefutable evidence, the company had no choice but to withdraw the demolition project and look for another plot of land for their development. More than that, they were forced to pay compensation to Martha for the troubles and the illegal attempt at appropriation. "Mrs. Martha," said Miss Harrison during the final meeting about the case, "you not only kept your home, but received a sum that will ensure your comfort for years to come." It was more money than Martha had seen in her entire life, enough to renovate the house, ensure the medical care she needed, and create a fund for Leo's future. "The first thing I'll do," she said, "is renovate the house so it's safe for a child to grow up in, and I want to set aside a part for Leo's education." Amber, who was present at the meeting, was moved by Martha's words. "You don't have to do that," she protested gently. "Of course I do," Martha replied firmly. "He's my grandson in my heart, and any self-respecting grandparent cares about their grandchildren's future." The house renovation began a few weeks later. Martha hired the same workers who had come to demolish the house to make the improvements. It was a poetic irony that didn't go unnoticed by anyone. "Mrs. Martha," said Tyler, the young man who had defended her rights from day one, "it's an honor to help you improve your home now. The renovations included a new roof, electrical system review, a complete paint job, and the creation of a special little room for Leo." Martha insisted on being part of every decision, wanting to ensure the house remained cozy and familiar. During the work, Amber began visiting daily, helping with Leo and participating in decisions about the future. The relationship between the two women had evolved into something like a true maternal partnership. "You know," said Amber one afternoon, as they watched Leo trying to crawl on the living room floor, "I never imagined a situation like this could exist." "How so?" asked Martha, intrigued. "Two mothers loving the same child without fighting over his love," Amber explained. "Everyone always said that was impossible, that there would always be jealousy and conflict." Martha smiled, understanding perfectly what the young woman meant. "Love doesn't shrink when it's divided," she replied. "It multiplies. Leo will grow up knowing he is very loved and that will only make him a better person. Months later, when the renovations were completed and everyone's legal situation was definitively settled, Martha organized a party at the house to celebrate. She invited all the neighbors who had supported her, Mrs. Jenkins and her team, Ms. Harrison, and even some of the workers who had participated in both the attempted demolition and the renovation. The little house was unrecognizable, the walls painted in cheerful colors, the flower garden in front, and especially Leo's little room with new furniture and colorful toys. It was the same place but transformed by love and perseverance. "This house has been the setting for a lot of history," Martha said to the guests gathered in the backyard. "It's where Arthur and I built our family. It's where I faced loneliness after he passed. And now, it's where I'm building a new family, different, but no less special." Amber was beside her, holding Leo, who was now almost a year old and beginning to take his first steps. The young woman had gotten a better job and moved into a small but decent apartment near Martha's house. She maintained shared custody, spending half the week with her son and half allowing him to stay with his grandmother Martha. "I've learned these past few months," Martha continued, "that family isn't just blood. It's a choice, it's care, it's being there in the hard moments and celebrating together in the good ones." Mrs. Jenkins, who had become a close friend throughout the process, approached at the end of the party. "Mrs. Martha," she said, "your case has become an example in our department. It shows that creative and cooperative solutions can work better than traditional ones when there's goodwill from all parties." "Life is already hard enough without us making it harder," Martha replied wisely. "When everyone wants what's best for the child, there's always a way to find it." The party lasted late into the night, with Leo being the center of attention. The boy had developed magnificently under the dual care of Martha and Amber. He was a happy, healthy child and clearly loved. When everyone had left and the house returned to silence, Martha sat in the refurbished rocking chair with Leo in her lap. Amber had stayed to help clean up and now joined them in the living room. "You know what I sometimes think," said Amber, settling onto the new sofa, "that maybe all of this happened exactly as it should have. If I hadn't gone through those hardships, I never would have left him with you. And if you hadn't been alone, maybe you wouldn't have opened your heart to care for him." Martha nodded thoughtfully. It was an interesting perspective on a situation that had caused so much suffering at first. "Every pain has its purpose," she agreed. "The important thing is not to let it make us bitter, but to teach us to be more compassionate." Leo fell asleep in her arms, his little face relaxed and serene. Soon, Amber would take him to her apartment, where he would spend the next 3 days before returning to Martha's house. It was a routine that worked well for everyone and ensured the child had constant stability and love. "Mrs. Martha," Amber said as she prepared to leave, "thank you for teaching me that being a mother isn't just about giving birth but about caring every day." "And you taught me that it's never too late to discover new kinds of love," Martha replied, hugging the young woman affectionately. After Amber left with Leo, Martha walked through the renovated house, touching the smooth walls and smelling the fresh paint. Each room told a different story now. The room that had been hers and Arthur's held the memories of the past, but Leo's colorful little room represented hope for the future. In the new kitchen, she prepared her evening tea and settled back into the rocking chair to reflect on everything that had happened in the last few months. From a lonely, elderly woman facing eviction, she had become part of an unconventional but deeply loving family. Mr. Henry appeared at the window, as he often did, to exchange a few words before bed. "So, Martha," he asked with a smile, "happy with the changes?" "Very happy," she replied, "but you know what makes me happiest? Knowing that this house will continue to be a home for a new generation." "Leo is a lucky boy," commented Mr. Henry. "Not every child has 2 mothers so dedicated." "We're the lucky ones," Martha corrected. "He brought new life to this old house." When Mr. Henry said goodbye and she was alone with her thoughts, Martha remembered the morning it all began. The terrifying sound of hammers, the fear of losing her home, the feeling of being completely alone in the world. Now, just months later, everything had changed. She had a safe, renovated home, financial resources to live with dignity, a support network in the neighborhood, and most importantly, she had Leo and Amber as her chosen family. "Thank you, Arthur," she whispered to the photograph of her husband on the wall. I know it was you who brought that boy to our door." In the months that followed, Martha's routine settled into a new normal. 3 days a week she cared for Leo, cherishing every moment to teach him new words, old songs, and family stories. On the other days, she received visits from Amber, who often came for lunch to talk about her son's progress. The young woman had enrolled in night classes to finish her studies and spoke enthusiastically about her plans to go to college in the future. Seeing Amber's determination to build a better life filled Martha with maternal pride. "She's becoming a strong woman," she commented to Mrs. Jenkins during one of the social follow-up visits. "The suffering she went through is turning into wisdom." "And much of that is thanks to your example," Mrs. Jenkins replied. "Amber has told me many times she learned about perseverance by watching how you fought for your home and for Leo." The relationship between the two women had evolved into something unique and special. They weren't just co-responsible for a child, they had become confidants and mutual support. Amber often asked for advice on matters that went beyond Leo, and Martha found renewed purpose in guiding the young woman through the challenges of adulthood. "You know," Amber said one afternoon as they watched Leo play in the backyard, "sometimes I feel like I didn't just get my son back, but also the mother I never had." The words touched Martha deeply, who had felt something similar. Her own children had grown distant over time, absorbed by their own lives and responsibilities. Amber filled an emotional void she hadn't even realized existed. "And I gained not only a wonderful grandson, but also a special daughter," Martha replied, hugging the young woman affectionately. "Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now continuing. 1 year after the attempted demolition, Leo was already walking confidently around the house, babbling simple words like grandma and mama, and had become a curious and affectionate child. Martha delighted in watching him explore every corner of the house with childlike fascination. The boy had developed a peculiar routine that perfectly demonstrated his unique situation. When he was at Martha's house, he would run to hug her legs as soon as he woke up. When he was with Amber, he did the same thing. For him, both were equally important and beloved mother figures. "He doesn't make a distinction between us," Amber observed during a conversation. "For him, it's natural to have 2 mothers. I think he'll grow up thinking all families are like this." "Perhaps that's not a bad perspective," Martha replied with a smile. "If more children grew up believing love can come from many sources, maybe the world would be a better place." The neighborhood had grown accustomed to Martha's family's unique situation. Leo was treated as the neighborhood's collective grandson, receiving affection and treats from all the residents. Gladys and Mildred took turns helping with the boy when needed, and even Mr. Henry had offered to teach him about gardening when he was a little older. "It's beautiful to see how a community can come together to care for a child," Mrs. Jenkins commented during one of her last official visits. "Your case has become a study example at our university." The story of Martha, Amber, and Leo had indeed attracted attention beyond the neighborhood's limits. A local journalist wrote an article about the situation, highlighting both the fight for the house and the creative solution for the child's custody. "Unconventional family finds happiness. Through love and cooperation" was the headline of the article, which generated hundreds of positive comments from readers moved by the story. Some families in similar situations made contact, seeking advice on how to handle non-traditional custody arrangements. Martha and Amber were surprised to discover that their situation, while unique to them, was not completely isolated. "Maybe we can help other people who are going through similar situations," suggested Amber, after receiving a particularly touching letter from a grandmother who had taken custody of a grandchild. The idea took root in both their minds. With Mrs. Jenkins's support, they began attending informal gatherings where they shared their experiences with other unconventional families. Martha discovered she had a natural talent for advising and comforting, while Amber could offer the perspective of a young mother who had overcome significant adversity. "You two together make a powerful team," observed Mrs. Jenkins after one of the gatherings. "Martha brings wisdom and experience. Amber brings courage and determination. It's a combination that inspires a lot of people. The house that was almost demolished became a meeting point for these families. Martha made sure to always have fresh black coffee and homemade cookies to welcome visitors. Leo grew up surrounded by other children in diverse family situations, learning from an early age that love comes in many different forms. During one of these gatherings, a lady named Evelyn said something that made Martha reflect deeply. "You know, Martha," said Evelyn, who was caring for 2 orphaned granddaughters, "before meeting you all, I felt ashamed of our situation. I thought people judged us for not being a normal family. But you taught me that normal is relative." "A normal family," replied Martha, "is one where people love and care for each other. The rest is just details." These conversations always happened in the presence of the children, who played together without concern for the family complexities that worried the adults. Leo, now almost 2 years old, was especially sociable and loved having the company of other children. "Grandma!" he would shout, running to Martha whenever visitors arrived, followed by an equally enthusiastic "Mommy" when he saw Amber. His natural joy was contagious and broke any initial tension that might exist among the visitors. On a particularly significant Sunday afternoon, Ms. Harrison came for a social visit. The lawyer had become a friend of the family after the success of the case and liked to follow the development of the situation. "Mrs. Martha," said Ms. Harrison as they had tea in the backyard, "do you have any idea of the impact your story has had on our office?" "How so?" asked Martha, intrigued. "We changed our approach to shared custody cases. Before, we always tried to define a primary guardian and visitation for the other. Now we explore more cooperative arrangements like yours." Amber, who was present, was moved to hear this. "Does that mean other families can benefit from our experience?" she asked. "Exactly," confirmed Ms. Harrison. "You proved that, when there is goodwill from all parties, creative solutions can be more effective than traditional ones." The confirmation that their experience was helping other people brought an even greater sense of purpose to Martha. She had begun that journey fighting only to keep her house and care for Leo. Now she discovered that her story was inspiring positive changes in the lives of other families. "Life has these surprises," she commented to Mr. Henry that evening, as they watched Leo play in the backyard under Amber's supervision. "We think we're only fighting for ourselves, but in the end, we're contributing to something bigger." "It's just that you've always been a special woman, Martha," replied Mr. Henry affectionately. "Arthur always said you had a heart too big for your own good." The mention of her late husband always brought a pang of longing, but now it came accompanied by gratitude for the happy years they had shared and for the solid foundation he had helped build. That night, after Amber took Leo home, Martha walked through the quiet house reflecting on all the transformations of the last 2 years. The house was unrecognizable compared to the simple cabin that was almost demolished. But the changes went far beyond the physical renovation. She had rediscovered purpose and joy at a stage in life when many people were just preparing to wait for the end. She had found a new and unconventional family that filled voids she didn't even know existed. And she had discovered that her experience and wisdom could be useful to other people in similar situations. "Who would have thought," she murmured to herself, looking at the photograph of Arthur on the wall, "that from that terrible morning so much good would come?" Leo was growing quickly, and with him grew the challenges and joys of shared motherhood. At 2 years old, he was a chatty and curious child who kept both Martha and Amber constantly busy. "Grandma, where's Mommy?" was a frequent question on the days he was with Martha. "Mommy, where's Grandma?" he asked equally when he was with Amber. For him, the time apart between his 2 homes was just part of the normal routine. He showed no anxiety or confusion, simply accepting that he had 2 homes where he was equally loved and cared for. "He's developing perfectly," commented the pediatrician during a routine checkup. "Children raised in loving and stable environments, even if unconventional, tend to be more emotionally secure." The doctor's observation was a relief to both mothers, who sometimes worried if the unique situation could cause any developmental problems for Leo. Amber had become professionally established and gotten a promotion at work that allowed her to further improve her living conditions. She bought a larger apartment, closer to Martha's house, and began talking about plans to go to college in the coming years. "I want Leo to be proud of his mother when he grows up," she said in a conversation. "I want him to see that we can overcome any difficulty." "He already has more than enough reasons to be proud," Martha replied. "You are an example of strength and determination." The relationship between the two had evolved into a deep friendship that went far beyond the co-responsibility for Leo. They consulted each other on personal decisions, shared worries and joys, and had developed a mutual trust that didn't always exist between biological mothers and daughters. One day, Amber arrived with news that surprised Martha. "Mrs. Martha," she said with some nervousness, "I need to tell you something important. I've met someone." Martha felt a pang of anxiety. Changes in Amber's life would inevitably affect Leo's situation and consequently her own. "Tell me about him," she said, trying to sound calmer than she felt. "His name is Kevin. He works at the same company as I do," Amber explained. "He's a serious guy, from a good family, and most importantly, he knows about Leo and our situation, and he has no problem with it." The relief Martha felt was immediate. Her biggest concern was that a new relationship might complicate the shared custody, or that Amber would find someone who didn't accept the unique family situation they had built. "He would like to meet you and Leo," Amber continued. "You want to understand our family better before getting more seriously involved." The young man's respectful attitude impressed Martha positively. It showed he took the situation seriously and understood the responsibilities Amber had taken on. "Of course you can bring him here," she replied. "It will be a pleasure to meet him." The meeting happened the following Sunday. Kevin was indeed a serious and polite young man, around 25 years old, who showed genuine interest in understanding Amber and Leo's family dynamic. "Mrs. Martha," he said during lunch, "Amber told me your whole story. I think what you've built together is really beautiful." "It's a team effort," Martha answered, watching how he patiently interacted with Leo. "And it works because we all prioritize this child's well-being." Kevin spent the afternoon playing with Leo in the backyard, showing a natural ease with children that reassured both Martha and Amber. It was evident he didn't see the situation as an obstacle, but as an opportunity to be part of something special. "He's a good young man," Martha commented to Amber after Kevin left, "and it's clear he really likes you." "And he seems to like Leo too," Amber added with relief. "I was so nervous he wouldn't be able to handle our situation." In the following months, Kevin gradually integrated into the expanded family. He attended Sunday lunches at Martha's house, helped with Leo when needed, and showed genuine respect for the special relationship between Martha and Amber. "It's interesting," commented Mrs. Jenkins during one of her visits, "how you manage to integrate new people into the arrangement without losing harmony." "It's because we established from the start that Leo is the priority," Martha explained. "Anyone who comes into our lives needs to understand and accept that." "And Kevin understood perfectly," added Amber. "He said our family is different, but no less valuable." Kevin's presence brought a new but positive dynamic to the group. Leo gained a male role model, something that had been missing in his life until then. The young man was patient and affectionate, and gradually won a special place in the child's heart. "Uncle Kev!" Leo would shout every time he saw Kevin, running to hug his legs. Seeing the child's joy confirmed for Martha that they had made the right decision in accepting Kevin into the family. More than that, she began to glimpse a future where Leo would have not just two devoted mothers, but a complete, expanded family. During a private conversation with Kevin, Martha wanted to make her expectations clear. "Kevin," she said one afternoon while Amber was putting Leo down for a nap, "I need to be honest with you. This family we've built is very special to me. I can't allow anything to harm it." "I understand perfectly, Mrs. Martha," he replied respectfully. "And I want you to know my intentions with Amber are serious. I'm not here to play games." "And what about Leo?" she asked directly. "Leo is part of Amber," Kevin answered without hesitation. "Loving her means accepting and caring for him too. And honestly, he won my heart from the first meeting." The sincerity in the young man's words convinced Martha that her worries were unfounded. Kevin truly understood and respected their unique situation. A few months later, Kevin proposed to Amber. The proposal happened at Martha's house during one of the Sunday lunches. With Leo present, and even involved in the surprise. "Leo," said Kevin, kneeling to the child's height, "will you give me permission to ask your mother to marry me?" The 2-year-old boy didn't fully understand the question, but shouted, "Yes," enthusiastically, drawing laughter from everyone present. Amber cried with emotion when Kevin officially proposed, and Martha was moved to see the genuine happiness of the young woman who had become like a daughter to her. "I have one condition," said Amber through tears as she accepted the proposal. "Our family stays exactly as it is. Mrs. Martha continues to be Leo's grandmother in his heart, and our shared custody arrangement remains." "I wouldn't expect anything different," Kevin replied, kissing Amber's hand. "This family is perfect just the way it is." The wedding preparations began immediately, with Martha being invited to take an active part in all the decisions. It wouldn't be a big ceremony, neither Amber nor Kevin had the means for that, but it would be special and full of meaning. "Mrs. Martha," Amber said during the preparations, "I would like you to walk me down the aisle. I don't have a father, and you are the most important person in my life besides Leo." The invitation touched Martha deeply. To be chosen to represent Amber's family on such an important occasion was an honor she never expected to receive. "It would be the greatest pleasure of my life," she replied with tears in her eyes. The wedding took place in a small neighborhood chapel, decorated simply but with great care. Martha, elegant in a navy blue dress she bought especially for the occasion, walked proudly with Amber to the altar. Leo was the ring-bearer, a task he performed with the seriousness of an adult, walking slowly and concentrating so as not to drop the rings. "Today we are not just uniting 2 lives," said the priest during the ceremony, who knew the family's story, "but celebrating a family that already existed and is growing even stronger." The reception was at Martha's own house, who insisted on offering her home and backyard for the party. The neighbors helped with food and decorations, turning the celebration into a true community gathering. "This house has been the setting for many important moments," Martha said during her speech, "but today might be the most special of all. Seeing our family grow and strengthen here is the greatest joy I can imagine." Kevin, in his speech, thanked Martha especially. "Mrs. Martha," he said emotionally, "you not only welcomed Amber and Leo when they needed it most, but you also welcomed me with open arms. I promise to care for this family with the same love and dedication you have always shown." The party lasted late into the night, with Leo being the center of attention until he fell asleep in Martha's lap, tired but happy. It was the perfect picture of a family that had found its balance and harmony. After the wedding, Amber and Kevin moved to a larger apartment, but they kept the established routine with Leo. The child continued spending half the week with Martha and half with his parents, a division that worked perfectly for everyone. "It's amazing how our situation keeps working even with the changes," Amber remarked during a conversation. "There are so many normal families that can't get along, and here we are with our crazy family living in harmony." "We're not a crazy family," Martha corrected her with a smile. "We're a creative family." The difference in perspective perfectly summed up the journey they had all traveled. From the initial desperation to acceptance, and from acceptance to celebrating their uniqueness. Leo, now 3 years old, was a happy and well-adjusted child who saw his family situation as completely normal. For him, it was natural to have a house at Grandma Martha's and a house at Mom Amber's and Uncle Kev's. It was natural to have 2 bedrooms, 2 slightly different routines, and the abundant love of multiple parental figures. "Am I sleeping at Grandma's house tonight?" he would ask, with the same naturalness as he might ask what clothes to wear. The child psychologist who was monitoring his development confirmed that Leo was growing up without any signs of confusion or emotional instability. "Children are very adaptable," she explained to Martha and Amber. "What matters isn't the family structure, but the consistency of love and care. And you two provide that in abundance." During Leo's 3rd birthday, the whole extended family gathered for a party in Martha's backyard. It was impressive to see how many dear people had joined the original circle. Kevin, the neighbors who became family, Mrs. Jenkins and her team, Ms. Harrison, and even some of the workers who had helped with the renovation. 3 years, murmured Martha, watching Leo blow out the candles with help from all the adults. "It seems like just yesterday I found him at the door." "And now look," said Amber, pointing to the boy running happily among the guests. A secure, loved child with a huge family that protects him. The party was a success, but the most special moment came when Leo, encouraged by Kevin, gave a little thank you speech. "Thank you for coming to my party," he said in his child's voice. "I love everybody here." The simplicity and sincerity of his words moved everyone present. It was living proof that love and family can take many different forms, all equally valid and precious. That night, after everyone had left, Martha sat in her favorite rocking chair and reflected on the extraordinary journey she had lived over the past 3 years. From an attempted demolition that almost destroyed her world, a story of love, family, and community had emerged, surpassing all her expectations. Amber appeared at the door with Leo in her arms, who had fallen asleep on the way home, but woke up when they arrived. "He wants to say good night to Grandma," said Amber with a smile. Leo stretched from his mother's arms into Martha's, hugging her with that special affection that melted her heart. "Good night, Grandma," he murmured sleepily. "Thank you for the beautiful party." "Good night, my love," Martha replied, kissing his forehead. "See you tomorrow." When Amber took Leo back home, Martha was left alone with her thoughts and gratitude. She looked around the house she had fought so hard to keep, and saw not just walls and furniture, but the setting for an extraordinary transformation. "Thank you," she whispered to the universe, to Arthur, to all the forces that had conspired to bring so much happiness into her life. "Thank you for teaching me that it's never too late to start over." The story that began with the threatening sound of hammers had transformed into a symphony of love, family, and community. And Martha knew this was just the beginning of many more adventures they would live together. End of story. And you, dear listener, what did you think of this story of love and perseverance? Tell us in the comments where you're watching from, and if you've ever lived through a similar situation. Did Martha make the right decisions? Leave your honest opinion and don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss other moving stories like this one. Thank you so much for your company.